Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we explore how work is transforming one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we want to take an inside look into AI transformation on a large scale, in a large organization, but not just any organization, one that is spun off from a large corporate multinational. A spin-off, just like AI entering the system, is a stress test. It pushes an organization into change and forces leaders to guide uncertainty and forces people to evolve. I've managed quite a few large-scale acquisitions and divestitures, so I can definitely see the number of significant parallel lines between these experiences and the types of challenges we have these days with organizations bringing AI into the mix, with the need to balance impact on strategy, but also on people. Which is why I'm delighted to have my guest today. Maryjo Charbonnier was until recently Chief Human Resources Officer at Kyndryl and is now their executive advisor. What's really interesting about her role is that Kyndryl spun off from IBM in 2021, and Maryjo oversaw the transition of 80,000 employees from IBM. That's really impressive. In these roles, she's deeply involved in translating AI from a strategy into workforce reality across tens of thousands of employees globally in a company that in itself has had to reinvent how it operates. Maryjo, welcome to Future of Less Work.
Well, thank you. Great to be here.
So I'm really, really curious because I've been on the other side of this so many years. When you look back at this journey, what's the one lesson from Kyndryl's transformation that you believe is most universal for other companies facing AI transformation today?
Well, I would say the biggest lesson I learned at Kyndryl is that you can evolve and change a culture and be pretty systematic about it. And lots of us talk about culture change. We at Kyndryl actually believe culture change needs an annual operating plan, like any other business metric. And I think when today we think about AI, it's really not a technology change. It's a behavior and cultural change. And so those lessons learned are definitely and increasingly relevant.
Okay, that's really, really interesting because we always, I like to say that culture is what happens in between the lines, right? It's everything you say and do, but also everything you don't say and don't do. And it's definitely difficult when you come in with legacy culture to create that transformation. And you say, okay, we put a plan in place. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
So first of all, we actually identified behaviors we wanted to see in the organization. And those were grounded in research that we did with our customers originally and our employees. Because in a service company, so much of your brand is how your folks behave internally, which manifests how they behave externally. And that's where we created something called the Kyndryl Way, 6 behaviors. I really love them because they're not the typical behaviors you talk about in a corporate setting. The first 3 are restless, empathetic, and devoted to shared success. And so we actually, what was that?
The first
Restless.
one was? Oh, interesting. How do you do
It's
that?
restless to continuously learn and innovate, which is what AI is all about, right? And so as we link and label back on the AI, the original transformation out of IBM, but increasingly our growth in an age of AI, we talk about constantly being restless to continuously learn and innovate. And we actually pull that through a lot of our core HR processes because one of the things that culture does is it manifests in a couple of ways, right? You had a great definition of it's what isn't said, it's what's said, it's what's tolerated, it's what's not tolerated. But how do all those messages get sent? They get sent through behavior. They get sent through systems, could be the annual operating system, the budget system, the promotion system, and then through symbols. And so do we lay those out systematically each year to think about, are the behaviors that we want to see in the organization manifesting enough? What dials do we want to tweak around those 3 things? And then we work together as a team. Myself as the head of HR, our head of transformation, our head of communications, and our head of marketing, create this steering committee with all of our teams to work with our business leaders about how do we bring these things to life. And that's what we have in the plan every year.
Okay. So I have a million questions, and I'm going to circle back to restless because I love that. But I do want to make sure I hear all six. So
Yeah.
you
So the
said,
first three speller colors, red, restless, empathetic, devoted to shared success. And that's how we interact with ourselves, our customers, and our communities. And then how we organize our work, also really important in an age of AI, flat, fast, and focused.
flat,
Mhm.
fast, and
That's all
focused.
of them.
Okay. So definitely see how shifting to these behaviors has helped prepare you for AI. So circle back to restless and take that as an example because you're right. I mean, it's how you end up not just saying it, but making it happen, right? And restless is an example. This whole idea of learning as in a learning organization, we've been talking about this for ages, and we haven't really figured out how to make it happen because ultimately we measure management and people on delivering, and learning is at the expense of delivering. So it doesn't get compensated. So how do you do that?
Sure. Let's talk about, how do you, because it's largely tied to how is work changing in AI. And I want to talk about that. And we use a framework called AIR. That's how we've been teaching the organization, and particularly our HR teams, about how to think about getting ready for the impacts in the age of AI, right? We have to anticipate how the work is going to change. We have to understand as the jobs and the tasks evolve, because what we're finding is first AI automates tasks, then workflow, then chunks of job, then jobs, right? And so the key to the ROI on this is how do you know how the work is changing to then redeploy the time that is spent on other things? So that's the anticipate. Then the inventory. How is the work changing? What skills are needed for the future? What skills do you as a Kyndryl, or that's what we call our Kyndryls, not employees, but Kyndryls. What skills do I have? How do I match to the work so that I can be reskilled and then redeployed? So that's the A, the I, the R, and the R. Okay. Because soon AI will be all around us like air. Okay. So
Yeah.
what we
Yeah.
talk to our Kyndryls about is, in an age of AI, it's particularly important you make yourself discoverable. We need to know the skills that you have, because that's how we find you to reassign you to new work. And we want you to keep your skills up to date. That's about being restless. So you can actually, if you're Kyndryl, you can see the work that we don't have covered. You can propose yourself for it to do the work. And so that you can see what skills we need. That's tied to our AI framework. And we don't believe everyone in a tech services company needs to know the same thing about AI. We have, thousands of jobs. And what I might need to know, and what one of our software engineers needs to know, or one of our sysadmins needs to know, really different. So we have a learning
Yeah.
framework that's customized for each Kyndryl to then look and see, hey, what do I think I need to know based on the job I'm in or the job I aspire to be in?
And basically, then we transition it to them to own it, right? As
The
opposed to,
manager to own it, and the
well,
employee, right? Because we want to make sure managers are also accountable in how we set our people priorities for the year in supporting the development of their Kyndryls as well. But yes, the employee has to take ownership as well.
so I have a question on this because having worked in, large, heavy multinationals, right? I can only assume that coming from IBM into this new situation, right? These kinds of um, expectations are not natural. They weren't probably for you, for the leadership, for the
Yeah,
employees.
it's a large change to start to change culture with, that many employees, which is why we wanted to be so explicit about what we wanted to see in the culture and what we continue to want to see almost 5 years later. And so, we did a whole bunch of things to roll out the Kyndryl way, and launch these behaviors, train on them, build them into, all of our kind of process, created a little handbook on leadership behaviors and sort of how to bring them to life that my boss loves. And then we started to measure them, right? So we do an employee engagement survey, and that's kind of look at all the standard stuff. But then we've actually year over year consistently picked questions that measure restless, empathetic, devoted, flat, fast, and focused. And we've continued to track our progress on them through the years. And for example, you wanted to know about restless. The question we look at there, I think we're pretty pleased with our scores. If you ask me what was the hardest one to change, and I think AI can help with this in an age of it, is do our work processes enable me to do my job productively? The fast, that was the question that measured fast. And sort of dismantling all of the processes and behaviors that create a lot of checks that slow things down in service of serving customers and being devoted to their shared success. I say that's one that we're still working on. We've moved the mark in 5 years. I'm hopeful with AI as it helps us automate workflow ourselves, not only for our customers, but how we get our own work done. We'll pick up increasing amounts of speed on that one.
That's really interesting. I'm actually wondering about flat because we've gone back and forth on layers and management and how many employees. And we always seem to kind of trickle back to where we started. How do you manage to change and sustain change
when we talk
there?
about flat, it's really empowered, inclusive teams. We don't sort of focus on the management layers on that, although we look at that, sure. It's a hard thing to measure. It tends to be a little mobile, as you probably know. And what we've talked and what we look at is, am I empowered to make decisions to serve the customer? That's what we're really focused on. And so I think we've made progress there too. As we've clarified roles, as we've streamlined processes, we've made progress there as well.
So all this sounds like a lot of unfamiliar territory for leadership. And I'm wondering, when we think through the lessons, right, that you've learned from all this, to anybody listening to us who's actually in the situation because of AI, right? What does it mean for leaders? What does it need to look like? Because the path is no longer as fully defined as we're used to it being.
Well, I think every age calls forth sort of its emphasis on leadership, right? It brings out different things at different times. And the things that we're thinking about in this day and age about how is leadership evolving? What does it mean? The first is, maybe it's been a while since we taught job design, process design. It's back to basics in some ways. As we are finding that AI can cut across silos and automate workflow, that often in a corporation cuts across multiple functions teams, right? We're going back to think about, how are we teaching the leaders to actually break down tasks so they can carve out the pieces, or maybe keep the pieces that you want the humans and the Kyndryls to be thinking about, and let the agents do the rest. So that's one thing. I think the second.
And have you, so I'm going to stop you on this one because I think it's one of the generic milestones or even building blocks these days that is being skipped by a lot of organizations. And so walk me through that one.
That one's in development in terms of, we have a dedicated leadership curriculum that we've taught and targeted certain groups to go through in certain orders. Part of what I think we found is being really systematic about managing culture with specific interventions is probably a lesson learned. And so we're thinking about adding a module into our leadership curriculum on this. And there are several sets of ways to go after that. And the teams are evaluating the options right now. So I'll have more to say, hopefully soon. On that.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the things I see, and I don't know if you've had this experience in a lot of organizations, is we're bringing AI into existing jobs and tasks. And maybe it's the way forward, but this idea that you actually can cut across some of the processes, and if you build them with AI, you'd rebuild them in a different way than you'd have, the way we're structured, right? And it's almost like structures gets in the way of doing the right thing.
And yet maybe it can automate some things. And that's kind of, what's the role of judgment in the future, right? And, we think about, if you think about what is judgment, maybe pattern recognition, right? Context. When has this happened before in a similar thing? And then what makes me, evaluate reward or consequence and have the courage to make a decision, right? So we think about judgment in the age of AI. You can think about one of the things we talk about with our customers is policy is code, right? All of us have policies we have to administer for our customers or internally. And you can teach and build the AI to administer that policy across multiple functions. And maybe it serves up when is something unlike when the pattern changes. So that, a Kyndryl can look at it and see, wow, this is really something different going on here. So I think it can enable judgment. And let's not forget empathy. It's tied to one of our, Kyndryl Way values. I think the importance of continuing to encourage us to be empathetic in the workplace, something we talked a lot about. We try to mirror in all that we do in Kyndryl because I think we'll all be under increasing amounts of stress as this is a big change for people to digest.
Yeah. So actually, let's talk about that one. And what's running in my mind right now is also that there's a lot of fear accompanied with bringing AI into the system because we talk about it in the context of AI replacing jobs, thereby replacing people, and then we see, the headlines, right, with companies cutting roles, which is kind of interesting because a lot of times they're cutting the roles before AI delivered on the promise. So how do you bring in empathy, or maybe even basic trust into this
Sure. It's a
conversation?
great question. Well, maybe in tech services, we sit in an industry that's been changing, right? Who is Kyndryl? We run the world's largest managed infrastructure services organization in the world. We are running some of the most complex IT landscapes on the planet. Half of the world's largest banks are our customers. And technology has been, as one example, technology has been ever changing in tech services for years right now. So I don't think it's a surprise for our folks to say, you need to keep your skills up to date. You need to make yourself discoverable for that new work. You need to have and see what we're talking about, our certifications we think that will be important for you to have. So I think part of the antidote of fear is always hope. And hope and being restless, being empathetic kind of all go together around, how can we, keep you the most employable you, the most discoverable you can be.
Which actually is a really, really good question. And historically, we haven't asked it, right? We care about you as long as you're my employee. Once you're, not, I don't mind. And talking about employability in the bigger picture is really interesting. I almost want to ask you, I know you've actually recently left your salaried position role, right? The formal job, but you're still associated with kind of consulting and working with the organization, which is a really interesting new way to think about employability. How's all this affected the way you think about your own career?
Well, let's see. Yeah. So I recently stepped down as CHRO, and happy to say that Mark Pollock, who's the new CHRO, is my successor. And, he and I worked together. He was instrumental in helping us for 4 years with me change the organization. So it's great to, role model what HR practicing, what we preach, that we should be developing successors and bench. So it's a great story on that. And I chose to stay around to help Mark with a few things for a few months as he transitions. So, look, I think it's a really exciting time to be in HR and to be thinking about how work gets done. I mean, the title of your show is great. I'm not sure about the less part, but I think the ever present nature of it, and I think it makes me more curious about the changes that'll come and how to make things better. At Kyndryl, we know that our employees have already created 25,000 agents to help themselves be more productive at work. That's pretty impressive. And so I'm excited that people are finding it a tool that actually helps themselves do their work better. So I think that's another antidote to fear, is to actually use it to improve yourself and your work and make your day better.
Yeah, and that, by the way, so when I called my show "The Future of Less Work," it was, first of all, I had a question mark in there originally, but it was not the AI will take your job kind of less. It was less of what doesn't matter and more of
Exactly.
what does. And I think that's actually interesting because it's, it's how we end up crafting what we do, how we spend our time, and what matters to us. That's very different than the old jobs where somebody else crafted, that
Mhm.
context for
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a really interesting journey. So if you think about all this journey that you've gone through, and I know you definitely used your own organizational experience to be prepared for the customers, what do you think we're underestimating about how to make all this work?
Hmm. I think one of our journeys has been really making sure, back to that, how do you anticipate how the work will change? How do you have a good inventory of the skills your customers need and the skills that your Kyndryls or your employees have? And then how do you get targeted on the reskill to redeploy? That's we're far along that journey, and that is hard. And let me tell you what's been hard about it. It's like the amount of data you need on skills. It's like a problem that is an abundance and an absence all at the same time. You tend to get a lot of skill data when you ask employees for skills, and you can buy different models that have skills associated with it. But it turns out what you really, really want to know is what skill is most important to your customers that you also run a profitable organization over, and what skills might be constrained. Okay, so if we had more of them, you could serve customers better, you could sell more, you could be more profitable, and or what skill is actually constrained that you need you could use you could use 10 of and you have two. Okay, that's been a real learning journey for us to be on, and I'll tell you a little story
Hmm.
on that because I think it could help some of your listeners. So we said, okay, first round one, all employees, tell us about your skills. I was so happy. 94% of Kyndryls told us about their skills. Great. And the business turned around and said, Maryjo, it's a lot of data. It's not actually helpful. Okay. Round two. Okay. Tell us about these skills. We worked with our different practices to define the skills that were important, that were constrained. So we got that better organized, and we went out to all employees and like, hey, tell us about those skills. And people are busy, they don't have time to go in and necessarily tell you about that. Okay, so crack the code round three. We actually used a piece of AI to analyze those career profiles we had for employees. And the first round of it, we couldn't get to the employee. It took us a little time. That was round four. But round three was we went to managers and we said, hey, these are your employees. This is the quality of skill data we have on them. Can you help us go make it better? And then we got to the employee portion where now employees, and we built a piece of an agent for them that can help them write their skills better, suggest things to them. Now we know that almost 90% of Kyndryls have a skill that's linked to something our business needs, which is phenomenal. We also found, 5% more certifications out there than we thought we had, which also helps the business. So what I would say is, it's easy to get started because you can buy help and there's various solutions in the marketplace, but nobody can replace the internal knowledge in the language that your business leaders speak about which skills are most important and why.
And that's really, really interesting because I had this question as you were speaking: do we even have the words to describe the skills that way, right? Because we've been talking about the skills-based organization for a while, and we still use resumes with professions and job descriptions, right? Because we don't really know what it means. And when you say innovative doctor is different than an innovative lawyer, that's different than an innovative, coder. So even the words to describe the skills are complicated.
Yes. And how the skills relate to one another. And can I make a prediction about if you have this skill, do you have that skill? make a prediction, maybe using AI about, hey, if you have these skills, how quickly can I train you to do a different piece of work? And that's really what we're working on next, right?
Yes, and that's a really important one. I actually saw a startup doing something interesting with that. So it's not necessarily the skill; it's the combination of skills that makes you interesting on a particular capability. And again, I go back to naming. I don't think we know. Frankly, I think part of the issue is because for so long we had to identify ourselves professionally through the hard skills, so to speak. We don't fully understand the nuances of human contribution that go kind of in between. Was like you code, AI can code. Does that mean AI can do you? I'm not sure, but can we understand what the you pieces are?
And I think the other piece that I think is a lesson learned that we've had, which is, look, in an age of AI, as it automates more and more work, I want to keep as many Kyndryls employable as I can for as long a period of time. I know Mark does now too, as the CHRO. So we really need to be looking at what is your contract workforce. All organizations use some amount of contract or subcontracted or vended labor. They call it various different things. But what we've been really working on with our colleagues in procurement and delivery is translating some of those purchase orders to a bill of skills. It's not a bill of sale, bill of skills. So that we can start to say, wait, we have a Kyndryl, we can reskill and redeploy to do that work. Because our goal, again, back to that value of empathetic, is I always want to put a Kyndryl to work first. And what I worry about for a lot of folks is, as we say with AI, oh, wait, no more resources, no more headcount, no more staffing. We all know it happens. Everybody then shifts a lot of the labor to potentially outsource. And so what we wanted to make sure is that we had a really good handle on that so that we could begin to look at, is there work that we can pull back in as we free up resources?
And if you can do a bill of skills for procurement, I'm assuming you can hire through a bill of skills, even internal hire versus through a standard resume.
Yeah,
Have
exactly.
you done that?
That's why actually when, and this is a part of that whole architecting of our talent supply chain, is in our core HR system, we actually import the skills needed to do the customer work so that we're doing the matching, the resourcing, if you will, the staffing down to the level of work, not just the job, the level of work that needs to be done for the customer. And so, yes, that's where we first look at our internal Kyndryls and the work our customers need. Then we're starting to increasingly look at the subcontractors and our vended spend to pull that work in. And only then, because I sort of look at it as a design flaw, if we have to go externally and hire, right? Because we want to make sure we're putting every Kyndryl to work every day as much as possible.
And were you able in this kind of skills-based talent marketplace, were you able to move people to work that were not necessarily from the job or the profession or the org chart piece? So, for example, I can do work for you, but I don't report to you, but I'm a fit.
We move Kyndryls from assignment and teams, provided, they have the right skills and of course, a bunch of important other things, like they have the right to do the work in that country, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. So we redeploy our workforce continually in that. So we can see that and measure that on a daily basis. What's also really great now is we can see the work and the skills associated with it that maybe we can't do yet. And that's where we focus training plans on. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, once you can start looking at skills, it's a completely different.
We're not yet at the point of a prediction on what we can teach you, but we can say, okay, we think you can do this, so let's get you enrolled. Let's get you the experience to do those skills.
So if I'm just kind of up level back to the company level, as we start wrapping up, can you tell if I'm listening at out there, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm on the right track? What does it look like when an organization's getting this right? What would be the signals that you'd be looking for?
Sure. I would say, look, many of us are using AI kind of in the personal productivity space, right? I've turned on potentially Copilot in my Outlook, things like that. But I think we all have to be thinking about, particularly in the HR function, about how is it being used to serve customers? And today we have 925 agents working to serve customers. How does it change the work? How does it change the jobs? And can we identify the skills needed that are, even 90 days out? It's a lot of visibility right now. 6 months.
Yeah.
I heard of an HR team working on a 10-year plan. I was like, wow, the ambitious.
Yeah.
Good for them. Okay. But I'm like, hey, if you're just even working 90 days out about how is the work and the jobs changing in terms of how you're serving your customer to be focused and devoted to their shared success, you're on the right path, even if you don't have all the answers. And I think today everyone's worried they don't have all the answers and they don't know maybe what they don't know. I would say worry about if you're asking the right questions. And a great question right now is, how are we using AI to serve our ultimate customer better? How do we think it can change the work? And what skills are going to be needed? If you're asking those 3 questions, even if you don't know the answer, just asking the right question gets you down the path.
Yep. That's fabulous. Thank you for that. So what I usually kind of ask for as we wrap up, instead of answers, kind of leading from where you started, was a question. What do you think is the question we should all be asking for these days about the future of work?
The question I would ask about the future of work is where are the most complex processes in your organization? And if you had a picture of them, could you figure out how to use AI to take the cycle times out so that you could reduce, and improve customer outcomes? I think it's kind of a variation of the ones I gave you, not knowing you were going to ask me to end on one. But I think, again, the antidote to fear is hope. And so let's end on that, which is, if people can be thinking about the things that's actually most frustrating to them, and seeing some improvement on the less work side, or maybe just less frustrating work side, I think that's a great place to start. I have a saying I love, which is never underestimate. It's from Margaret Mead, but never underestimate what a group of committed citizens can do to change the world. In fact, and indeed, it's the only thing it has. So I would say band together with some other committed citizens in your organization to figure out how you can make it a better place.
Yep, that's a fabulous one. Thank you so much, Maryjo, for joining me today. Help unpack what it really takes. For more about Maryjo Charbonnier, check out the links in the episode description. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow The Future of Less Work wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, your best people do not work because you measure them or you tell them they work because they want to, because by working for you, they're doing what's important to them in life. Till next time.